5, and then Sam's going to read you in, and you're going to go. Mickey, we're recording? Yeah?
Yep.
All right. 5, 4, 3.
Hello, welcome to Exploring Asian-ness in RPGs, a panel full of Asian people talking about, Asian-ness in RPGs. I'm Sam, aka Bubblegum Sam. I do a lot of design focusing around intimacy, trauma, Christianity, and Asian-ness. That's my tagline. But I've also been doing some other stuff based around capitalism, corporate culture, magical girls, all this sort of stuff. So that stuff I'm quite interested in working on in the future. My big project, which I like to plug, is Capitalize, a game about urban Asian young adults getting their shit together. So you basically play, just any Asian young adult you see living in the city. They can be hustlers or like players and stuff like that. So the aim of the game is to see how these characters sort of like live in a very real world. And yeah, my favorite Asian food is, it's hard to pick one, but recently I've been cooking pork adobo. It's quite good. It's not from Malaysia. Oh yeah, I'm from Malaysia. Bleh, I'm from Malaysia. Pork adobo is from the Philippines. Been enjoying cooking that. Yeah. And on to, BJ.
Oh, it's me. Okay. You can call me BJ, which is short for Buko Juice. My real name is out there somewhere. Buko Juice translates to Buko Juice, and I am a Filipino from Manila. My design usually is D&D adjacent or sometimes OSR. I was also a writer slash designer slash researcher for the Islands of Sinauna, which just came out. You can find most of my work at bukojuice.itch.io. My older work comes from my prior internet name, Nospecatu. You can still find that. That's 4th edition stuff, D&D also. My current project, I'm working on something called Taller Punk. Taller is Filipino mechanic shop, so it's very grimy, very dirty, and I'm thinking about doing something with that and inserting transforming jeepneys and a lot of 90s aesthetic. And by 90s, I mean 1690s, 1890s, 1990s, 2090s. So it's kind of like a mishmash of those cultures into one. As for my favorite food, since I'm Filipino, adobo gets mentioned a lot. I actually cook adobo and I'm very fond of that. But currently, I've been getting into kilawin, which is basically cooking fish in vinegar. So no actual fires are used. So it kind of turns out being sort of raw on the inside, but cooked on the outside. It's pretty good. So that's me. Do I choose who's next or the sun does that?
Let's go to Kaz.
All right.
Hello, I'm Kazumi. I make games. I recently made a game called Reverie. It's about a bunch of people, well, not even people, but a bunch of characters who are searching for a city of light in the midst of darkness. And the project was basically about trying to use Dungeons and Dragons rules to do something that wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. And I did that by thinking about how the characters of Dungeons and Dragons are actually like really important to the world building. And if you change the archetypes away from your traditional Dungeons and Dragons characters to something weird like a flying crow that is telepathic and the spirit of the moon who's trapped on the earth, then you get a weird kind of vibe that is no longer Dungeons and Dragons, despite the fact that it is kind of recognizable as the thing from the rule set that I'm using. So that's a lot of what I do, is like messing around in terms of like mechanics and like flavor and seeing how those things mix together. And also I'm on Twitter and I talk a lot, and that's also a big thing that I do. I just say stuff. So that's me. I say my favorite food is probably like dumplings, like all kinds of dumplings. I got I'm vegetarian now, so like egg dumplings, like chai dumplings, like mushroom dumplings, all kinds of dumplings. That's good. So that's me. I'm gonna hand it back off to Sam.
All right. Next, we have Akemi, also from California.
Hi, I'm Akemi. Yeah, Sam said I'm from California as well. Uh, I've been designing games both professionally as a mobile game designer and for hobby for about a year.
I'll do it.
One of my most recent games was a kind of take on the Japanese holiday of Obon as a game, but my next project is completely the opposite direction. You play as a lost sock trying to get back through the magical portal that transported you to make sure to get back to your other sock. My favorite Asian food. I guess I might cheat and go with okonomiyaki because that literally translated that means whatever you like fried. It's kind of a pancake-like dish where you put in cabbage and from there you can put in pork or you can go with cheese and mochi. Really, whatever you feel like putting into a pancake thing. And,
All right.
back
Nice. Right. All right. Lastly, we have Thomas. You want to introduce yourself, where you're from? Sam, do I do a lot of design focusing around intimacy, trauma, Christianity, and Asian-ness. That's my tagline. But I've also been doing some other stuff based around capitalism, corporate culture, magical girls, all this sort of stuff. So that's stuff I'm quite interested in working on in the future. My big project, which I like to plug, is Capitalize, a game about urban Asian young adults getting their shit together. So you basically play, just any Asian young adult you see living in the city. They can be hustlers or like players and stuff like that. So the aim of the game is to see how these characters sort of like live in a very real world. And yeah, my favorite Asian food is, it's hard to pick one, but recently I've been cooking pork adobo. It's quite good. It's not from Malaysia. Oh yeah, I'm from Malaysia. Bleh, I'm from Malaysia. Yeah, pork adobo is from the Philippines. Been enjoying cooking that. Yeah. And on to, let's see, BJ.
Oh, it's me. Okay. You can call me BJ, which is short for Buko Juice. My real name is out there somewhere. Buko Juice translates to Buko Juice, and I am a Filipino from Manila. My design usually is D&D adjacent or sometimes OSR. And I was also a writer slash designer slash researcher for the Islands of Sinauna, which just came out. You can find most of my work at bukojuice.itch.io. My older work comes from my prior internet name, Nosfecatu. You can still find that. That's fourth edition stuff, D&D also. My current project, I'm working on something called Taller Punk. Taller is Filipino mechanic shop, so it's very grimy, very dirty. And I'm thinking about doing something with that and inserting transforming jeepneys um, and a lot of 90s aesthetic. And by 90s, I mean 1690s, 1890s, 1990s, 2090s. So it's kind of like a mishmash of those cultures into one. As for my favorite food, since I'm Filipino, adobo gets mentioned a lot. I actually cook adobo and I'm very fond of that. But currently, I've been getting into kilawin, which is basically cooking fish in vinegar. So no actual fires are used. So it kind of turns out being sort of raw on the inside, but cooked on the outside. It's pretty good. So that's me. Do I choose who's next or the sun does that?
Let's go to Kaz.
All right.
Hello, I am Kazumi. I make games. I recently made a game called Reverie. It's about a bunch of people, well, not even people, but a bunch of characters who are searching for a city of light in the midst of darkness. And the project was basically about trying to use Dungeons and Dragons rules to do something that wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and I did that by thinking about how the characters of Dungeons and Dragons are actually like really important to the world building. And if you change the archetypes away from your traditional Dungeons and Dragon characters to something weird like a flying crow that is telepathic and the spirit of the moon who's trapped on the earth, then you get a weird kind of vibe that is no longer Dungeons and Dragons, despite the fact that it is kind of recognizable as the thing from the rule set that I'm using. So that's a lot of what I do is like messing around in terms of like mechanics and like flavor and seeing how those things mix together. And also I'm on Twitter and I talk a lot, and that's also a big thing that I do. I just say stuff. So that's me. I say my favorite food is probably like dumplings, like all kinds of dumplings. I'm vegetarian now, so like egg dumplings, like chai dumplings, like mushroom dumplings, all kinds of dumplings. That's good. So that's me. I'm gonna hand it back off to Sam.
All right. Next, we have Akemi, also from California.
Hi, I'm Akemi. Yeah, Sam said I'm from California as well. I've been designing games both professionally as a mobile game designer and for hobby for about a year. One of my most recent games was a kind of take on the Japanese holiday of a Bon as a game, but my next project is completely the opposite direction. You play as a lost sock trying to get back through the magical portal that transported you to make sure to get back to your other sock. My favorite Asian food. I guess I might cheat and go with okonomiyaki because that literally translated that means whatever you like fried. It's kind of a pancake-like dish where you put in uh, cabbage and from there you can put in pork or you can go with cheese and mochi. Really, whatever you feel like putting into a pancake thing. And,
All right.
back
Nice. Right. All right. Lastly, we have Thomas. You want to introduce yourself, where you're from?
Hi, I'm Thomas Manuel. There's some construction noise. I hope that's not getting picked up, but if it is, I apologize. I am a journalist primarily. I work as a journalist. I'm a playwright. I'm a game designer. Um, I I publish a newsletter about indie RPGs called the Indie RPG newsletter, and you can find it at ttrpg.substack.com. It's the thing that I'm sort of like the proudest of at the moment, and it only exists because I'm too scared to tweet. So yeah, go check it out.
All right. What's your favorite food? Asian food.
Oh yeah. I'm just gonna pick like the default Indian option, which is like biryani. I think I'll go with that.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, standard, standard. All right. So the theme of the panel would be basically asking ourselves what is Asianness, because my personal assumption or observation is that when people use the word Asian in storytelling or in games, we are thinking about a text which uses like an Asian culture's aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like if you're making an Asian game, or we think about a Chinese game, we are thinking about wuxia. We're thinking about something akin to like Raise the Red Lantern, where there are a lot of where we have like very distinct Chinese architectures, very distinct, very I don't want to say other, but I mean we can't escape Orientalism. So a lot of like this sense of like looking in on different culture and being like, ooh, this is how they do things differently. This is how they do things, in a weird way. Or usually you use Asian cultures or races mythology. For example, if I'm making a Malaysian game, people are going to assume, oh, okay, he's going to be using Malaysian mythology. And I think this is an assumption that Asian people ourselves might have. So when it comes to like marketing and talking about games and we describe it as Asian, what do we mean? Because if we are Asians, right, if we make a game, it's gonna be Asian regardless. You know what I mean? It's gonna be authentic to us, but even if it doesn't fit that aesthetic. So the aim of this panel would be to sort of like ask ourselves, okay, what is Asianness then, if not aesthetic, if not mythology? But I mean, of course, it is those things, but how can go beyond that? So I'm gonna ask. Let's go in the order from left to right on the Discord chat. So let's start with like DJ, Kaz, then Akemi, then Thomas. Then I'll chime in at the end. That sound good? All right. So I do want to ask you, when you hear of an Asian game, like what's your personal assumption? Like what pops out in your mind automatically? Yeah.
So without knowing anything else about the game, if I am told that this game is an Asian game, typically, I'm not sure if this applies to everyone else, but to me, that automatically gives me the assumption that this was written by a non-Asian person. Because an Asian person would not call it an Asian game. I don't think so, at least. So usually they will say what the game is about, and then it just so happens that they're Asian, and then their Asian identity flows through the game that they wrote already. So that's actually a ping for me. It's like it's almost as strong as that part of that word, the word Oriental. When you hear the word Oriental, you automatically know, no Asians were consulted in the creation of this story. So that's what it means to me. But at the same time, I'm also a designer who does use a lot of mythologies from my context, from the Filipino context in my games. So my game does get flagged as an Asian game because I'm Asian and I use a lot of these things. I wrote a game called Kakamania, which is an adventure, an OSR adventure. It's about cockfighting in a small town, and it's D&D compatible. I never once mentioned that it is an Asian game, but it is talking about a practice that has been around in Southeast Asia for at least the last millennium, because chickens, some scientists say that chickens originated in Southeast Asia or are endemic to Southeast Asia, and then they just spread from there. So it's always been part of our culture. So I think that's what it means to me when something is called an Asian game. So rather than that, I'm always looking at, is this game made by an Asian person? And that's where the conversation actually starts for me. There.
All right. Kaz?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, when I hear the word Asian game, that's like a red flag, right? Like, you really gotta think about what that means, right? Because, like, when we do Asian things, right, I think of Lisa Lowe has this stuff about heterogeneity, hybridity, multiplicity, right? These three words about how it's really an impossible task to say Asian people are like this, even within one Asian person, right? Even within one person, we are multiple, we are hybrid, and we are heterogeneous, and that's not even accounting for our communities, and that's not even accounting for, in this context, because she was writing in the Asian American context, that's not even accounting for in this context where I can be in community with all of y'all from all these different places, right? And so we're also, especially in the RPG community right now, speaking from that global context and speaking from the way in which, not only are we talking about Asians in diaspora, we're also talking about, all of us together in this different way. And so, yeah, like the really like undefinable quality of what it means to be Asian is really what I am centering, I guess, when I think about Asian game. And I love Cogomania. Like that game goes so hard because it really doesn't try to make itself fit into any kind of box, right? And you might read it and be like, oh, that's a Filipino game, but the heart of it is like something that I don't know, like it emerges from that context, but it always exists in conversation with everything, that BJ has done, all the other games, all the other life experiences. And so, yeah, like the context is one thing, but once you slap that label on it, it becomes really hard to like justify that Asian label, right? So that's what I'm thinking about. I'll pass it on.
Akemi?
Yeah, kind of very much the same in that there's no one way to define an Asianness. Like, my most recent game, I was definitely pulling experiences from both being a Japanese American and having lived in the US like basically all my life. But then I've also lived in Japan for 3 years and was like, oh, let's pull someone from there as well. So it ended up being this very mixed part of culture that I was pulling from for inspiration for this game. But it's all part of something I've experienced. They're two completely different worlds, but yet at the same time, it's all part of the same world. And like Kaz was saying, it is kind of a red flag to say something is an Asian game when one, you can't define Asianness, and two, there's so many different types of Asian. Like even just Asian American versus actually living in Asia from a different part of Asia. Like there's so many different parts to this that it's kind of I kind of think it's cool that it's not easily definable, because that would make it too simplified, and it's almost better to have it a bit more vague so that other people can figure out what this means to them as well. Off to you, Thomas.
I actually sort of tried to look up how the word Asia, sort of the etymology of the word, because I was interested. Like nobody in Asia came up with Asia, right? I mean, if you guess that, you're right, because Asia seems to be a word from ancient Greece, like in this, their word for the land that comes after modern day Turkey and Iran, which they called Asia Minor, and they refer to Africa as Libya and things like that. So, like it is like even the origin of the word is just like an unknown, right? It is like something that is elsewhere, and I think it's like a lot of people have said, it's really hard for an Asian to think about Asian representation because of the multiplicity of identities that exist under the term. Like even even the sub identity of like Indian is something that I can't really represent, right? There are like in an international conversation, I can speak as an Indian to some extent. It's a very compromised position, but yeah, I can do that. But within my own country, I'm like I can represent such a small minority of the people here, right? Like for example, like I'm a Christian. I was born Christian. I'm not. I don't actually believe anymore. But that's like 2% of this country's population. This country has like 700 languages by one estimate. So yeah, it's a very sort of compromised kind of idea of representation.
All right. But yeah, I do agree with all of you on that. I think the irony here for me personally is that I mentioned in the introduction, I do sell my Asian games as Asian games, even though I personally don't believe that title is enough. But but this is the world we live in. I feel like this is a world where if I want to sell myself, and I've noticed this personally, that like if I it helps to in a community of in a global community, in a Western dominated community, it helps for me to present myself as an Asian person because it sells, and it's like, oh, it is what it is. But you know, by the way, if anybody wants to has any comments after we finish question, you can just jump in. Anybody has anything to add, or we can move on?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I realized half of the games that I've made so far are very, very heavily reliant on Japanese culture aspects or things from Japanese culture, and then the other half of the games I've made have absolutely nothing to do with it. And yeah, like, literally one of my games is about a martial art I happen to do and kind of turned into a game. So, like, I have to kind of acknowledge, yes, that it is very, very Japanese, and then by that definition, very Asian. And I want it to be that way. Like, sometimes that's what we're trying to actually make. Sometimes that's very much, no, that's not what I'm trying to do.
Right. Any other comments? All right. So next we're gonna talk about, okay, now that we have sort of like discussed that paradoxical part. In your own words, describe Asianness or respective cultures. Like, for example, I'm Malaysian Chinese. How is my work Malaysian Chinese, for example? So yeah, BJ can start by sort of like depending how we can do this however you want to. Like, you can sort of like explain how your work is Asian, or explain how your work is distinctly Filipino. Yeah.
It's hard actually because I think the emergent narrative that we have right now is that Asian in general will defy categorization or defy taxonomy. I've been talking with a friend of mine about designing monsters because that's one of the things that I like to do. I like to write about monsters and then stat them for RPGs. When we talk about monsters in the context of a lot of Western games, like D&D or just about every system that has originated in the West, there's always like this creature is a fae or medium fae, large beast, gargantuan undead, or things like that. It's harder to do that with my games because a lot of the monsters, for example, that I write, I'm focusing on monsters right now, but a lot of the monsters that I write defy that. When you talk about the Lady of the Balete Tree in Filipino culture, modern interpretations of it see it as a ghost of a girl who died in a car accident by crashing into the tree or something like that. But it's actually a very old tale, and older versions of it are just a spirit that lives in the tree, or there are versions of it where it's the goddess of the tree. So I think with my games in particular, transitioning into games that I write, I am specifically a Manila Filipino, a Manila-based Filipino. I'm Tagalog. My ethnicity comes from the Malay Tagalog, as well as some Spanish blood in there and some Chinese blood, but very diluted at this point. So I can speak of my experience as a person who lives in the capital city of a third world country. but there are a lot of things that I cannot do as a Filipino, or I can only touch upon as a Filipino. So, in essence, I guess that's what my games are. My games are going to be focused on the urbanity of being in a very crowded city. Is that Asian? I'm not sure. Uh, but I am Asian, so I guess that counts.
Right.
Back to you, Sam.
Kaz, go ahead.
Yeah, like I feel like a lot of it has to do with again like the way in which the taxonomy does not work and does not function when we come to these kinds of things. You don't look at a game that we make and say, oh, it contains qualities A, B, and C, and therefore it is Asian, right? But it's rather that our um, position in the world, right, which is Asian, again, because of our having been named as such, and also because of our working through the identity of having been named as such and taking it on for ourselves, right, both of the things at the same time. Because those things are both true, then the things that we create are going to reflect are working through having been named as such and claiming such a thing, right? As well as then working through the way in which we come together in this having been named and claiming, right? So I think those are like three things, right? So we've been named a thing, we're claiming the thing, or we're working with other people who have been named and are claiming. And so our games are going to reflect all of those things happening at once, right? Whether we make a game that can be recognized as Asian, right? Whether we make a game that cannot be recognized as Asian, right? Those things are still part of the Asian experience because they bear the markers of this kind of categorical thing that's happening to us. And I do think it is happening to us just as much as we are making it happen. So that's how I'm thinking about it. And I think what's important then is to see that our games coming from this position are really about the way in which we see the world and the way in which we are working through that world and through our own identities and the way in which the creativity that comes from all of this working through. Right? I really do believe, like you're saying, we're in this panel to work through. I also think games are working through. I think we're always designing to find what happens to ourselves and to the world when we make stuff, right? So that's what I feel like an Asian game is it's like all these positions, all of our identities, all these convergences having been written on and writing ourselves coming together and we make a thing. And it just so happens to look the way that it does because of this having happened to us and us doing the thing, right? So that's my spiel. I'll pass it on again now.
Oh man, you took so many good thoughts right there. One thing I kind of want to touch on, both EJ and Kaz kind of skirted about the concept of intentionality. Like, yes, our games are this way because we've created them this way, and that's on the creators and how we've presented it. And making an Asian game and intentionally doing it is a very different thing than making a game that has Asian themes or is considered Asian. So, as I've already said, half of mine are very, very derived from Japanese culture. But that's not necessarily what makes them an Asian game, because by definition, my other half of games that I've made are also based off my experiences and my abilities to create, making and being my life experience as an Asian person also translates into those games. I think that's where I'm gonna go with that.
Okay. Thomas.
I the someone mentioned authenticity and something like that. And authenticity is my favorite thing to completely ignore. Like I think it is it's a demand that we have somehow been cultured into thinking that we need to meet. So I went and like found this quote that I read a long time ago from Borges, and Borges was talking about being an Argentinian and what an Argentinian writer writes. And this is what he said. He said, "We must not be afraid. We must believe that the universe is our birthright and try out every subject. We cannot confine ourselves to what is Argentine in order to be Argentine, because either it is our inevitable destiny to be Argentine, in which case we will be Argentine whatever we do, or being Argentine is a mere affectation, a mask. I believe that if we lose ourselves in the voluntary dream called artistic creation, we will be Argentine, and we will be as well good or adequate writers." And I quite like that, you know. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
I think my take on this is that I'm gonna bring up one of my games, Capitalites. It's quite fucked up, but like not the essence of it is fucked up, but like it's me looking at something which I feel is very fucked up because I come from Malaysia. There is, even though it's called Malaysia, we also have like very significant Chinese, Indian populations here, and even when I say Indian, I'm talking about not just South Indians, not just Hindis, but also like Tamils, but like not just from South India, but also from North India. We're also talking about people from Myanmar, Bangladesh. We're talking about refugees. We're talking about people from the Philippines, Indonesia. It's very like melting pot in the way that, you know, I know like America likes to say that, the USA specifically likes to say that they are a melting pot, but that's not. But obviously it doesn't come together as they were like, and I think the same applies for Malaysia, where I'm reminded of the Avenue Q song. Everyone's a bit racist. What I mean by that is not to say that firstly for me that I go out and commit hate crimes or whatever. It's more like we all have this admitted. We are all sort of like relegated ourselves to existing within our differences. Right? It's this weird thing where we have this sense of shared camaraderie based on our difference. You know what I mean? And there are a lot of internalized things that come from the older generation. You know what I mean? Like Chinese families will tell their children, "Don't marry. If you marry an Indian boy, I will kick you out of the house." That's something which is said. And when we hear that, we go like, "Oh shit, that's racist." But like, we shrug it off because it's just so normal here. But it's that sort of discrimination that is like, it's so like commonplace. You know what I mean? And especially in the urban area, everything just sort of like smooshes together. These things get pushed down. I know Chinese women. Some of them like to fetishize brown men. Brown again is a homogeneous word because that can mean Eurasian, that can mean Indian, all that sort of things, and sort of like Indian men like to fetishize Chinese women. It's very like very weird. It sounds very. I think if someone from the USA hears this, they might be like, "Wait, what?" But I'm just being honest, lah. That's how things are normalized here. So in Capitalites, I sort of like try and like whether I'm not sure whether it was conscious at the time, but now it's conscious where I choose not to talk about race because, like, you know, I don't want to like a D&D class thing where you pick off a checkbox and go like, okay, I'm Malay, I'm Indian, I am Chinese. That's not gonna work. But in Capitalites, what you are determined by is your social class, your class, and your gender. And what I'm interested in seeing is like how different Asian people play the game, bring their lived experiences into the game, and how they tackle this idea of class and like gender. Like Indian women, Chinese women, they're treated very differently. And if you're a successful woman, Chinese or Indian or Malay, you will definitely face a lot of like criticism. You know what I mean? You'll face a lot of like troubles. And if a man does the same thing, he won't, but he'll face different troubles. He'll have better his own mindset, that sort of thing. So like For me, that is what all that massive conglomeration of like fucked up shit and like stuff that's been normalized, that stuff that I live in, right? That to me is Asianness. That to me is Malaysianness, urban Malaysianness specifically, because like it's a beautiful it's a beautiful mess. Uh, you get what I mean? Like it's just something that's so interesting to me, but that's something that people don't record. So now, so like in Capitalize, that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, for me, Asianness basically is this oppressive structure of like where other Asian people beat each other down, where men beat women down, where women beat men down, where queer people beat everyone down, everyone beats queer people down. That doesn't sound necessarily Asian, but in my lived experience, in my world, this is Asianness. So yeah. Anyone have any other comments they'd like to add?
Yeah. Can I? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, Tom's going.
No, I just not specifically in addition to yours, but I just remembered something. I wanted to talk about what BJ said about monsters and what Kazumi said about taxonomy as well. I think there's this. It's like games are about taxonomy to some extent, right? They're sort of like we're used to thinking of them as like the process of taxonomizing certain things, and at the same time, like so many. I think China Miyamoto said this about Cthulhu. He said, this creature was invented to sort of be unfathomable, and then D&D says it has 220 hit points. Like, how do you? There's a tension between saying, oh, be really terrified of this thing, and also like if you get 221 like damage, it's dead. So I think a lot of what we're pushing against is also just when we say like how do we represent whatever non-traditional Western game design, for example, like some of it is just kind of ignoring like certain taxonomies completely. And when it comes to myths, I think there's a part of it, and also like I don't know if others feel this way, but there is this tension in India, at least, that I feel when using myth, is that myth is very very easily used by like the right wing as a way of propagating nationalism and generally sort of like othering communities that don't participate in those same myths or don't hold those same myths. So I personally don't use myths at all. Like in the sense, or when I use myths, what I'm using is some kind of generic mythness. It's not like I don't talk about Hindu myths. It's not interesting to me because Hindu myths are. I mean, they are actually very interesting to me, but I still don't use them because they're part of this kind of majoritarian sort of right-wing movement/moment in India right now. So yeah, that's all I want.
Yeah, I guess I can pick up off of that, which is just like it's really interesting how in some context, right, that myth can be super right-wing, but then you transpose it to another context and it becomes a kind of resistant mode. Right, and it very much has to do with the context in which that thing is created. So that's just me responding off of that. I think also the Cthulhu thing is really interesting. And I think Cthulhu could also be a metaphor for kind of what we're talking about, this unfathomable thing that then becomes solidified within the like D&D context, right? Like somehow you just give Asians hit points and then they become fathomable, right? Like that's what happens, like on a mechanical level, in terms of how that works. And I think what I wanted to say about capitalize, right, is that I keep going back to this quote from Stuart Hall where he says that race is the modality through which classes live, which is just to say that we experience our class through our race and through racial markers. And I think it also means the same way in which you're talking about this mess, right, of race. What is Asianness? You're saying, how can we say that Asianness is this thing? But there's this way in which race is also the modality through which gender is lived, right? And race is also the modality through which sexuality is lived. And so when you say, oh, this feels Asian to me, a lot of the time that means that feels like a particular class that is my lived experience to me, or that feels like a particular gendered experience to me. And you cannot easily separate the things out, right? To the point that, yeah, it is mess, to the point that, yeah, it is Cthulhu, right? And then when we try to give it hit points, then all of that complexity goes away, right? And so that's what I really love about Capital X is like, it is indecipherable in a way where one thing ends and another begins. And it asks us to confront these things and to throw them against each other. Like all these playbooks are just doing these weird things, like making things happen with regards to one another. And I'm gonna go a little bit back even more. I want to read part of this poem because I felt inspired after you dropped some foreheads on us. So this is a poem by Mahmoud Darwish to Edward Said, right? And he talks about identity, and I think that you can think about Cthulhu and you can think about Asian Americans with this. So this is an excerpt. He says, "And your identity," said I, in his response, and this is Said, self-defense conferred on us at birth. In the end, it is we who fashion our identity. It is not hereditary. I am manifold. Within me, my outer self renewed, but I belong to the victim's interrogation. Were I not from that place, I would have trained my heart to raise Medinim's gazelle. So take your birthplace along wherever you go and be a narcissist if need be. Exile the outside world, exile the hidden world. Who then are you between them? I do not introduce myself, lest I lose myself. I am what I am. And I think that could be as much a metaphor for what we're talking about here and Cthulhu. So I'll drop my mic now and pass it off on that Cthulhu thought.
BJ?
Okay, sure. But basically, since we're talking about Cthulhu, I just want to share that there's this joke in the Philippines that said that basically Cthulhu won't work here because he's this creature of the sea that comes out to try to terrorize us, and it's this giant squid. Wait, did you say giant squid? We're gonna eat the crap out of that. We're gonna fry it. We're gonna put it under fire. We're gonna put tomatoes on it. So it also connects to my other point. For me, why I use mythologies is because the Philippines is a heavy Roman Catholic country because we were invaded and conquered by Spain, and they stayed here for 300 years. So a lot of our myths are actually rebellious in a way. If you're talking about the gods that preceded the arrival of Catholicism, so that for me is the context of me using mythology. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Anybody has anything else to say? Add on to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mostly we can sum this up with context is key. But one thing that really struck me was, like, I realized so much. There's a lot of games that use mythology, but then mythology from Recio is really fascinating to me personally. But just thinking about it, of just how much mythology is actually like present in day-to-day life for anyone everywhere. Like, and that's why I'm having interesting thoughts on this and trying to formulate it as I speak. But it's great to have basis in mythology for games. It's great to not have basis in mythology for games because games reflect aspects of life, and our day-to-day lives, for the most part, don't have that much basis in mythology. But so it's interesting to realize, like, most people from a various culture do not think about their own mythology on a regular basis either. But I'll say with that.
Actually, something to add to that. Interesting thing about Southeast Asia, because I grew up heavily Christian. Now I'm still a Christian. I'm still very much Christian, but I'm like pretty fucked up version of one. So basically, the interesting thing here is that when these colonizers, they come in, they introduce Christianity, they introduce their religions, Catholicism, whatever. The local cultures, what happened here is that, I'm pretty sure this happened elsewhere, but like we mixed it in, this also happened in the Philippines as well, but we mixed it with our local superstitions or local beliefs. Yeah. So I remember going to Malacca, going to the very Catholic Indian part of town, and we have Indian fortune tellers on the side of the road outside the church, and like probably like a white Christian will come over and be like, why are there Catholic fortune tellers here, or or especially for me as a Christian, like our idea of charismatic spiritual warfare actually comes from uh is a mix of like Hindu spiritual practices and Buddhist spiritual practices. Like we like to do exorcisms and all the sort of like weird in tongues and all that. That stuff I actually realized does not come from Christianity. It comes from local Asian religion, and then suddenly gets mixed in, and people are like, yes, this is the true Christianity. I'm like, no, it's Buddhism, it's Taoism, it's like it's animism, but you are like mixing together, and that's I think that's not that's fucked up to me, but that's also like interesting in a way. Another point I like to bring up is like the fact that Southeast Asians, we just generally accept the presence of supernatural. It's hard to find even an atheist who is like, oh no, spirits don't exist, demons don't exist. Even Muslims believe in Chinese demons. Christians believe in like believe in like like the spirits of land and stuff. And it's very like it's not even something I question. It's not something we question because it's just every day. Like everybody knows someone who got possessed. You know what I mean? I've seen people get possessed before, and it's not seen as a mental illness or anything. It's just it is what it is. Like if we go to a certain part of town at night, you're gonna see shit. I have friends who have well multiple friends who just see like just casually see ghosts and we're like, oh okay, so you see saw a ghost again. Oh okay, is that like I don't know. I don't care to explain it lah, but like it's just interesting to me how like that local those local beliefs and attitudes just sort of like survived throughout colonialism, and to the point where like Christianity here is just not not at all like what Christianity is in the States. It's amazing. Yeah. Any other comments before we go on to the final question? Yeah.
Just quick again. That's actually very similar here in the Philippines. Here, I was talking to Filipino American friend of mine recently, and I was telling him about how an ex girlfriend used to talk about the time when she and her group of hikers got harassed by a tikbalang in Mount Banahaw. And my Filipino American friend's reaction was, I understand now why you broke up with her. And I'm like, Actually, no, because this is just something that happens here. If the tikbalang shows up, you just you don't question that it was it really a tikbalang that harassed you. Maybe it was just a wayward horse that was galloping around and who happened to be angry when you tried to pray the Hail Mary at it. so so I think that's an interesting point of view also that gets lost in the diaspora. To the diaspora, I think there's a strong sense of these are just stories and myths. But when you're here, you could be a rational, college-educated person who believes that this is not real. But when you pass by that anthill, you say tabi-tabi po, just in case they're real. So better be safe than sorry. And that's it. Back to you, Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Just a small I want to add on to that. Like, wait. Hold on. Okay, never mind. It escaped me, but yeah, basically that's it's just weird. Anyway, okay. So last question. So what are I think we brought up a lot of problems. With like how Asianness is perceived, how Asianness is like whatever. this is going to be a bit spicy, but let's just go spicy. What do you feel are problems right now present in the TTRPG scene and industry, and what do you suggest we do to fix it? You don't have to call out names, but you should just just talk about the big problems. What bothers you? Go ahead. Okay.
Okay. So specific to the TTRPG scene, right? Huh. I really try to avoid talking about this, but this is the best time to talk about it, I guess. Um, Look, I like D&D. There are issues right now with D&D, but I think these are issues that are workable. Okay. My problem is when we try to work at it, there's that sect of the D&D fan base that insists that our problems are imaginary and keep dragging it back down to, is this a problem? I feel like it's been an answered question for a decade or even more now that this is a problem. Let's go to the next step. How do we fix it? Because for example, one of the pushbacks that I noticed when I was talking about a monster called the Buso. It's a monster that came out in the AD&D Oriental Adventures. It is based on a Hiligaynon creature here in the Philippines, and it's a very different version in D&D compared to what we see, what we know of in our local stories. So this is something that I brought up from time to time, and I get pushback on this because apparently Gary Gygax did his research, and therefore cannot be wrong. That's not how it works. Even if someone does their research, I do a lot of research for my monsters, and I get things wrong. So when I get things wrong, I correct, and then we move forward in a new direction. Whereas Gary Gygax, just by virtue of being the creator of D&D or being the person who wrote it in the 1970s, 1980s, somehow his word is law and cannot be changed. If that were true, we should still be playing AD&D right now. So, but we're not. We're playing D&D 5th edition. Things can change. We can change things. We can make things better. Why are we stuck in this idea that this is just the way it should be? Oriental Adventures was written by a white man who did some research on Asia, but that's barely scratching the surface. He doesn't even understand what it means to be Asian, or what it means to be folly to call something Asian. So I think that's the biggest problem right now. The whole pulling back into, is this a problem? Can we just focus on solving the problem? So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Kaz?
Yes. I just feel like so much of it can be summed up with like what Vijay just said. Like, and I think I want to expand on it too, which is to say that like Oriental Adventures exist because Dungeons and Dragons exist. Okay, like these things are not like, oh, here's the good one and here's the bad one. Like Oriental Adventures grows out of Dungeons and Dragons because Dungeons and Dragons itself is built on Orientalist tropes, right? You don't necessarily need to be in the Orient to have Orientalism, right? Because the knowledge structure of Orientalism is the static and unchanging East, right? That's set against the dynamic West, right? And so you can see that even in just the way that the races are formulated in Dungeons and Dragons, right? I'm not like against races in Dungeons and Dragons because I don't like races, right? But it's the particular way in which the racial formations occur, such that they're not contextually defined. We're not racialized people in Dungeons and Dragons, but they literally exist as they are forever, and they're static and they don't move, right? That's the problem to me. It's not even Oriental Adventures. It is of course, it's Oriental Adventures, but there's more going on, right? It really is so much of this, like the very inherent nature of this game that has come to define the entire community, right? And the problem, again, like, isn't even this thing. Like, I don't care about this thing. What I care about is that this thing has material consequences on our lives. Like, at the beginning of the show, you started out and you said, look, like, it's advantageous to mark myself as Asian right? Because I can sell more games. Like, why is that true? Right? It's not an inherent fact of the world that labeling yourself in such a way makes you sell more. Right? It's the fact that because we see in this way, and because the entire community sees in this way, right, which is not helped by the fact of Dungeons and Dragons. It's not only Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not helped by the fact of Dungeons and Dragons, right? By labeling ourselves as such, right, that's how we sell games. And then we perpetuate the issue when we continue to make games that only can fit into this box because we know it'll sell, right? And so it's on us to, like, not us as in like Asians, but us as a community, right, to think about how do we reconfigure our desires so that we are not interested in this Asian myth as this separate, static, unchanging thing, right? But rather we conceive of, like I said earlier, that this Asian myth can emerge in different contexts and mean different things to different people. And the point is that we are the ones who are making and working through it. And it's our working through the thing that matters ultimately, and not the thing that we make, right? Once people can see that we are doing that kind of work and we're not offering a product so much as we're showing that this is the way in which we are thinking about ourselves and the world in different contexts, like, that's what I want people to see, right? So that this is work that we're doing. We're not just fucking out here doing whatever, like trying to give y'all oriental shit that you can put into your Dungeons & Dragons game, right? Right? It's about this other way of being to see the kind of stuff that we're doing, interacting with the stuff that we're making, right? That dynamic always has to be in play. And so what I would ask is to, like, really have people think about your own desires, right? Your own wants to be in this Orientalist setting, right? And maybe think, what's behind that? And how can I actually, like, reconfigure my mind knowing that my desire has adverse effects on people, even if it doesn't look like there's anything going on.
Okay.
Man, I have to follow up on that. you and BJ, like, stated all this so eloquently of some of these issues are, and what we can do about it. And I don't know, like, I try to, like BJ, I kind of also try to keep out of this discourse because it's exhausting. But yeah, I guess the best way to solve all this. I don't really have a solution to solve all the problems, because that also seems like it would create other issues of making uniformity or conformity as the default, which we also don't want. Yeah. Don't really have good ways of expressing these thoughts on this.
Did I?
Don't be a bigot. I guess this is more on the not on the creators ourselves as Asians, but just in general. Don't be a bigot, and things get better.
All right. Horace, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, any question that says how do you solve a problem, suddenly, like, everyone's like, oh shit, like, you know, we ask questions, you don't give answers. That's for politicians. No, but no, I don't have any grand thoughts about the TTRPG industry or anything like that, but I think one of the ways the American market looks to solve issues about representation and harm and things like that is with this institution called sensitivity readers, right? Cultural consultants, that kind of thing. And it's better than what was there before, but I don't think a sensitivity reader can say, for example, this project shouldn't happen, right? Their whole purpose is sort of constructed to say, like, what do we need to do to make this project happen? Tell us how to not get in trouble. And that's sort of like a crazy formulation of someone's job, right? Like, like, I'm going to use you as semi-insurance for call outs, and it's sort of weird, and I don't like it, and I don't know if there is, like, this is not a criticism of sensitive readers or culture consultants, right? They're there and they're doing something, they're doing good work, but they don't have the power in that relationship, I think, in most cases, and that's that's suboptimal. Somebody else say this better.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. That was why I came to this panel. That's why I created this panel with the intention, to have people say real spicy shit, But can't argue with that. No, I agree because sorry.
10 minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's wrap this up. So yeah, in terms of spicy shit, the thing about sensitivity readers, right? A lot of my centrist friends like to bring this up. Netflix and representation, you know what I mean? Forced diversity and all that. I can understand why they are annoyed, because suddenly it's like, wait, this guy is black now, or this guy's a girl now. But then these guys are the same guys who will watch The Boys and be like, they don't see the irony because The Boys just do a lot of race and gender changes, but it's done in a way which is clever, I think, which sort of commentates on the state of capitalism, blah blah blah. The point here is it's all very surface level. Sensitivity readers, I am a sensitivity reader, so I sort of I see the value in it, but at the same time it's the problem will always be root, you know what I mean? The problem's always gonna be inside our bones. When it comes it's like how D&D and Oriental adventures, this it's a very eugenist metaphor, but in its genes itself, in the genes of D&D, it's like, if you wanna, a lot of problems that come up, like you say, it's all part innate to the brand, is innate to the thing, and as a designer, it's already innate to you. Even as an Asian person, right, I come from a place of privilege. I come from, as a Chinese person, I'm both majority and minority. I'm majority minority doesn't even matter in Malaysia, because the Chinese have this weird position where we are all quite successful, but we have more high class Chinese people than they are of blah blah blah. Don't want to stir up controversy, but at the same time, I'm in this weird position where I have a lot of internalized things which inside my mind I need to sort of get out, which I need to operate on myself, and so I pick up, especially in regards to queerness, religion, all that sort of things. And I feel the people who do say the most problematic things are people who come from sort of a non-privileged state, in a way, if you get what I mean, because we assume that just because we are other, therefore we have authority on this, but we don't. We have some authority. We can share our experiences, but at the same time, all of us have ingrained things inside us, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, but we need to be careful of. And sensitivity reading, like you said, Thomas, it's like an insurance against cloud. And I remember recently there was a controversy at Troika where they hired a sensitivity reader, and even that didn't turn out well. That's not a guarantee. I'm just thinking what the person they hired to do sensitive reading is thinking about right now. Oh shit, this is my fault because I could have prevented it by being a better sensitivity reader. But that's not the case, because the whole exotic warrior thing, if I think BJ has more to say about this, but it's all very like I said, it's messy. It's messy. So hiring it's just messy. It's I guess what I want to say, the solution is just to fuck up, and once you fuck up, know you fucked up and learn from it, because we're all gonna fuck up. I'm gonna fuck up. You know what I mean? I'm a minority, but I'm gonna fuck up anyway. So yeah. All right. Any more final comments? Yeah. Okay. Yes, BJ. Oh, we need to talk about the elephants in the rooms.
Well, that is its own discourse, but I think my best takeaway from Troika was that I was discussing this with ZXU, a fellow Malaysian, right? My take on it is, as designers, it's hard to design with the mindset of, will the West fuck this up? I think that's the crux of it. There are problems with the exotic warrior, and I think there should be a discourse on how to fix that. That is true. I don't think that should be in question. But I also think that there are also things to constructively fix it, as opposed to destructively fix it by just let's just remove this thing from the game. So, because even if you create a perfect Asian game that does not offend anyone, has no issues. I'm sorry to say to the Western people, but I'm pretty sure you're going to find ways to fuck it up. And the the important thing is, if that does happen, we should have a community that's able to talk about this and then move forward with a new mindset. Okay, this is wrong. Let's course correct and then move forward again. It's not a whole you fucked up and now you can no longer be part of this community. That's weird. Unless you are actively hostile. There are actively hostile characters in the community that has to be like ostracized or excommunicated or whatever, I think. But that's more the exception than the rule. More likely we just do things that we didn't think would be wrong but is actually wrong. We take stock of that. We do our apologies, and more than that, we make steps to make sure that the moving forward we are better people. I think that's it. Back to you, Sam.
Anybody else? No? Okay. My final comment about that, having problematic material, I think you're going to offend people. So I think my mindset right now, especially with Capitalize, again, shameless plug because it's important to me, but like, I just saw these problematic elements and just went like, okay, I'm just going to put them in the game. You know, I'm going to take all these offensive elements. Like, one of the characters is called the Slut. You know what I mean? It's an exploration of like Asian femininity and power. That's my explanation of it, based off a real person. But yeah, I think there is a way to do problematic material if you tackle it in a non-problematic way. I'm going to leave it at that because like, I don't want to give examples because people will disagree with my examples, and that's fine. But we're at the end. And yeah, I thank you all for coming. Thank you for joining. Thank you all for meeting in your respective time zones as well. I think that's about it. All right. So long. My name is Sam. This has been Exploring Asian-ness In RPGs. Bye.